In Wednesday's red and blue political roundup, President Trump is issuing a warning to a committee of lawmakers as they begin negotiations to keep the government open. The House-Senate Conference Committee convened for the first time Wednesday. The bipartisan group got together as part of the deal that ended the government shutdown. They're tasked with finding a solution to the White House's border wall demand. The president made clear his position on the talks. He doubled down on a physical barrier at the border and tweeted the lawmakers would be wasting their time if they did not discuss it. Let's bring in Molly Hooper. She's a CBSN political contributor and reporter for The Hill. All right, Molly, here we go. What do we know about the committee of lawmakers who are tasked with actually trying to come up with a solution?
Well, we know that most of them are appropriators, and appropriators are sort of a different class of congressmen because they want to get money spent. They like to write the checks. And this whole government shutdown issue has just boggled their minds, and really they want to come up with a deal. And even though some Democrats have come into this conference committee, including Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Texas, saying, you know, we aren't going to spend any money on the wall. You have a ... there because he says, but this is the beginning of negotiations and we want to negotiate. Now, keep in mind, when I talk to members of the House and I talk to members of the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, they think if left up to their own, this group of folks, this group of lawmakers could get a negotiated deal on Homeland Security funding that included some kind of border security, perhaps not a complete wall, but barriers of some sort, and that would be fine. But just like one old veteran Republican lawmaker told me this afternoon, the challenge is you've got two strong and immovable objects standing in the way, one being the President of the United States, the other being the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And this gentleman, Frank Lucas, a Republican from western Oklahoma, said, it reminds me of a situation in which you have two raging bulls butting head in a pasture. Who's going to win? You don't know. You just get out of the way. So again, it's unclear, how far the committee will get to go if either side, the Speaker Pelosi or Donald Trump, nixes the idea.
So, yeah, the funding deadline is February 15th. That's a little over 2 weeks away. Given what you just said, Molly, about these immovable objects, how much concern is there on the part of lawmakers that there could be another government shutdown here?
Well, talking to Republicans privately behind the scenes, Senate Republicans in particular, they don't want another shutdown. They don't like the shutdown. They didn't like it the first time, and they are prepared to let Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, have it as they did before, at the tail end of the last one. So it's clear that Mitch McConnell wants to find a way forward any way he can. And privately, if that means the president needs to declare a national emergency and go forward and try to build this wall on his own, then so be it. They just want to make sure that there is no, lapse in funding for the federal government. It didn't work for them, they don't feel, and it's not going to help them move forward going into 2020.
So an interesting development this time around. The president's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, has been involved in the negotiations. Yes. So tell us what the White House feels he brings to the table, and is there any indication that it's working?
Well, I can tell you more so from the congressional perspective. Individuals who worked with Jared Kushner in the run-up to the passage of the criminal justice bill, the criminal justice reform bill, which was a huge bipartisan effort that took about a year almost in the making to get done. They see Jared Kushner trying to, relive and revive that effort, getting, bipartisan senators. You had people like Cory Booker teaming up with individuals like Utah Republican Mike Lee to pass something that both parties already supported. It was just a matter of getting to yes. The effort that Kushner's trying to take on is a little bit different in that both sides do want immigration reform, that's true, but how you get to that immigration reform is a lot more complicated than the parts that went into getting to a federal criminal justice reform act, which had been something in the works for years. And with the amount of time allotted, basically 16 days by my count, it's unlikely to happen in this narrow of a window. And again, the White House is also dealing with another issue. They have a legislative branch liaison who is essentially on her way out. They've lost another liaison. So really, Kushners coming in to sort of fill a vacuum. But again, when you're dealing with such immovable, senators, and keep in mind, you have senators, a bunch of whom are running for president this go-round. And it's not 2018 anymore, it's 2019, which is 1 year closer to 2020.
That's right.
And they're really kind of, these issues that they're trying to negotiate on, like building a wall on the border, that's a lot different than a federal criminal justice reform bill.
Right. It changes the political calculus the closer and closer we get to 2020. Let's switch gears here. Several U.S. intelligence chiefs gave testimony this week contradicting the president on numerous foreign threats. Mr. Trump tweeted his defense Wednesday, calling them, quote, naive and passive. What's the biggest point of contention here for the White House?
Well, the White House believes that Iran, that these intelligence chiefs should have emphasized more of a threat from Iran and less of a threat from ISIS. And that's just not the way that the intelligence chiefs spun it. Essentially, Dan Coats, who's a former senator himself, who's the director of national intelligence, said essentially ISIS is still an ongoing threat and needs to be dealt with. Iran, much less so. And that prompted the president to send these tweets that not all the people in his party agree with necessarily. Just talked to Peter King, who was a longtime member of the House Intel Committee, and he's on the Homeland Security Committee, and he said, listen, these Intel chiefs, they're doing the best they can. The president definitely has his opinions on these things, but, I tend to side with what the intelligence chiefs are giving us, the information they're giving us. And even Democrats are semi-amused by it. I talked to several who said something to the effect of, what's wrong with the president? He's the one who appointed these individuals, and now he's contradicting the very people he appointed because he doesn't like what he hears. So there is a bit of consternation up on Capitol Hill with Donald Trump sending those tweets, countering and contradicting what his intel chiefs are saying.
And I know you just talked about your reporting on this. You mentioned Peter King, but I wonder, when you look down the road, I mean, seeing these kinds of very public disagreements between the president and the intelligence community, is there a sense among some lawmakers, particularly Republicans, that it's going to get to a point where they're going to have to pick a side if these disagreements continue to be aired publicly?
Well, and then that's the calculus, and therein lies the rub, because when I'm up on Capitol Hill, and of course the Democrats are in the majority in the House, one would think that I'd be staking out Democrats to get their reaction to this, but again, it's Republicans that we want to talk to, because the president is still sending out these tweets. And when it comes to intelligence issues, and in particular, you look at issues like Saudi Arabia and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia's role in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post reporter. There was a great deal of Republican outrage and backlash at that, and willingness to take actions against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and other entities where Republicans are siding with the intelligence chiefs and the intelligence over what the president is saying.
I mean, as you pointed out, the president himself appointed most of these intel chiefs. How is it that there can be such a disconnect between the White House and the agencies?
Well, and that's something, and that's something that Gregory Meeks told me, and he kind of laughed about it, chuckled about it. But that's the question, and it does. You'll hear Democrats making more critical, critical statements about this. But basically, you have somebody like Lacey Clay, a Democrat from Missouri, saying it's a threat to our national security if the president doesn't listen to these people. These people are. They are there for a reason. They have a long history of working in intelligence. We need to listen to what they're saying, and they're concerned that the president does not listen to them. And again, this is where you'll see Republicans even introducing legislation that would essentially block or counter a policy position that the president has taken on intelligence that they don't believe the president's necessarily correct on. For Syria, for example, is one such option.
Right, right. All right, well, Molly Hooper in Washington for us. Molly, thanks for breaking that all down.
You're welcome. Thank you.